Do you like going by Dr. Lowe, Dr. Bobby?
Bobby's fine.
Sweet. I see you got Cougar cross country on.
Oh yeah, this is the new one from when they won.
Are you part of the team, like the team mental coach or anything like that?
Yeah, so I work. So here at BYU, we have a team. So if you call the team Sports Psychology Services, it's broken up into two parts, and half of it is our clinical mental health services, which is there's two clinical therapists that are over here. And then the other half is our mental performance side, which is myself and Dr. Craig Manning, who are over here on the mental performance side. So I work with all the teams. He and I share responsibilities, but we work with all the teams, all the players, on helping them learn how to think the right ways so they can play and compete and get their best out of them.
Yep, that's kind of what I thought. Is Dr. Manning the one that wrote the book about fear?
Yeah, it's called The Fearless Mind.
There we go. Yep, I read that one. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a great one.
And what's your background? Where are you from? Did you play sports?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I grew up playing sports. I'm from here. I grew up in Provo, went to Timpview High School, and then came over here to BYU. I ran track here at BYU. That's actually where I met Dr. Manning and kind of fell in love with the whole sports psychology side of things. I was kind of a struggling athlete, not loving how my results were coming out or not loving my performance on the field. And then one of our coaches said, "Hey, you need to go see Dr. Manning." This was back in 2005. So at the time he was still the women's tennis coach. So he was coaching tennis, but he was finishing his PhD in sport and performance psychology. And so I went down and started meeting with him, and I said, "Teach me everything you know." And started to apply the things he was teaching me, and then kind of went from being this average, mediocre athlete to I climbed the ranks. I became an NCAA All-American. I went to 4 national championships while I was here, and then went on to have a 3-year professional career as a pole vaulter.
Oh wow!
And then when I finished, I sort of fell in love with sports psychology because of, how learning the mental side of the game kind of unlocked my physical side, and then obviously seeing positive results there. And so then I went and studied it myself. I went out to the University of Missouri and did all my graduate education. In sport and performance psychology, and then worked for the athletic department out there for a few years at the University of Missouri, and then we moved back here. So.
Okay, so you're married and have kids, I assume?
Yep.
Okay. I went to Provo High, by the way.
No kidding.
I graduated in 2001, and I've lived in Utah basically since then. My dad was a circus clown for Barnum and Bailey, so we moved around a lot here in the Midwest, and Minnesota and North Dakota. I was born in North Dakota, and I'm a communications guy. Like, I graduated from UBU with a communications degree. I've got an honorary degree from a church institute in Los Angeles. And by profession, I founded a news network of a bunch of news websites. We publish all kinds of random stuff. Some of it's fake news, just to be blunt. You kind of can't avoid that these days if you want to make a living. But I don't publish anything that harms anyone. I'm super conservative, so I'll never publish anything illegal or that promotes gambling or things like that. But I do love publishing stuff about Trump and about guns because I have the choice, so I'm going to.
Yeah.
And so that gives me time to spend basically deciding what I want to do with my day. Because I turned over the operational side of things over to a team. They decide what happens day to day. I have no idea what's publishing across all my sites. It's thousands of articles a day. And AI helps with a lot of that, which I love. So it frees me up to have passion projects like interviewing cool people that I actually find interesting and want to just get to know. And you're one of those kind of people. And so
I'm glad I made your list.
It's a list that's so random, it's not even a list. So you probably know one of my really good friends, Coach Dave Hool.
I do know Dave, yeah.
Yeah, he lives about 5 doors down from me here in AF. And he's coached both my athletes. We live in American Fork, and they're on the track team at AF. And
I know Timo really well too.
Yeah, my son is a jav and disc thrower. So he's on the track team, but he's no running involved. Yeah. So yeah, I love that.
Let me ask you a question. So I'm gonna make a guess. I think my dad probably taught you how to drive. So my dad was Coach Lowe at Provo High for years and years and years. He was the track coach and the cross country coach, and then he taught driver's ed. So
no, I did driver's ed at PG.
No kidding.
Just my 10th grade year was the only year I went there, and the football coach was the driver's ed coach.
There you go.
But I do have semi-fond memories of going to football and basketball games where we played Timpview. And yeah, a lot of history there.
Yeah, so you graduated in 2001?
Yep.
I graduated in 2002. Oh, so we wouldn't have overlapped because you said your sophomore year was at PG. Yep. So I did do my freshman year at Provo High. So my freshman year was at Provo High. And then my dad retired right after that. And so I went back to Timpview. So if you came to Provo High right after that, you wouldn't have crossed paths with my dad.
Nope.
Funny timing there. 2001. So I was really good friends with like Phil Witt. You know Phil Witt?
Yeah. W-I-T-T.
What's that?
His last name is W-I-T-T.
Yeah. And then, gosh, I'm sure we could share a whole bunch of names just from across the town, but that's fun.
Well, yeah, the longer I live in Utah, the smaller the world seems to get. So I don't really have an agenda for what I want to talk about. I'm having this transcribed and recorded so I can just randomly ask questions, and my AI is going to make it look professional when we're done, and it's going to end up being published on one of my news sites. And if you have a photo headshot that you really love seeing in print, you can email it to me. Or
yeah, let me dig one up.
Yeah, do that. So I just watched the movie Without Limits on Sunday. It's the Steve Prefontaine story. And I watched it by myself because my family does not like watching those like life-affirming movies very much. And so I end up watching a lot of them by myself. But that one of the things he said in there really stuck with me, and you actually wrote about it on LinkedIn. It actually may not have been you, but somebody on LinkedIn wrote about, he was the top American marathoner. He just broke the American.
Connor Mance, the half marathon. He just broke the half marathon.
That was you that wrote about that, right?
I think there were lots of people, but I made a comment about it,
yeah. Well, one of the things he said, and he was a BYU athlete, right?
Yeah.
He said he can just endure pain longer, right?
Yep. That's kind of one of his mantras is I can just endure the pain longer than anybody else.
And I don't know if that's 100% verbatim from the Without Limits movie, but that sounds almost identical to what they attributed to Steve Prefontaine. And that's how he thought about sports, at least. He could just take pain more than anybody else that he was competing against. And I mean, I never played sports in high school. I played a lot of church ball, and there's a lot of pain involved there, for sure. And I coach my daughter's basketball team right now. But the more I'm around athletes and athletics, the more I see the concept of pain endurance having such a huge impact in not just sports, but if you go on and start a business, if you're in a relationship, just all your ability to withstand all the kinds of pain that exist. It's a big learnable trait.
Yeah, no question. And here at BYU and even some of the professional teams and professional athletes that we work with, we have sort of a roadmap of mental strengths or mental skills. And the ability to endure pain really is the essence of grit, right? Like that's the mental strength of being a gritty person. Which there's a couple of pieces to that, right? Like you have to love what you do. You have to have passion for what you do. And in the case of sport, right, the ability to endure pain longer than others really comes from, well, I have a passion or a love for this activity or this sport or competing. And so that passion or that love plus the ability to just persevere and persist is the essence of grit. And so that's actually something that we work on regularly with players, with athletes, and kind of developing the right kind of phrases or the right kind of languages to help build that skill, right? So you called it a learnable trait, right? We definitely call it a learnable skill. And the way we learn that is through how we talk to ourselves, through the words and the phrases and the language. And so one of the things I love about Connor Mance and the particular phrase is when he's out there racing, he often will say, like, I love this. I can endure this longer than anybody else. And that keeps his mind in what we call a proactive mindset versus a reactive mindset, which would be somebody who's out there saying, oh, my legs are dead. My legs are totally tired. I can't do this anymore. It's too painful. I'm just going to give up, right? And so that's sort of the dichotomous thinking in terms of that skill of grit, right? I can endure the pain. I can't do this. I got to give up, right? And I love that you said, well, this applies to everything else, right? It applies to everything in life, right? If you're going to school, if you're starting a business, if you're running 190 different, news outlets or news websites, right? Like there's going to be moments that are going to be difficult and challenging. And there's going to be moments that are going to test that grit. And you have to decide, okay, can I push through this? Can I persist? Or am I going to give up, right?
Yeah, that you obviously spend a lot of time thinking about this and talking about this concept. And, I love that you're willing to share some of the how when it comes to doing that kind of thing, because it's with anything that we learn, any skill, if you've got a good framework for learning it, and of course you have the desire, the passion, and you've got somebody that can help walk you through it, humans are capable of incredible things. And
yeah, no question.
We are our own worst enemy when it comes to doing anything really in life that's worth doing.
Yeah, no question. One of the things I'll add to that I often share with players and I often share in my work is that most humans actually never fully maximize their potential, right? So if you think about, okay, we have gifts, we have traits, we have abilities, we can obviously learn skills. Most of us never fully reach and fully maximize all of our potential, right? Because of things like that, because of fear, because of worry, because of anxiety, because of worrying about people judging us if we fail. And those are the things that, and then a lot of, self-doubt type language. I can't do this. I'm not any good at this. I don't have those skills. I don't know how to do that thing yet, right? Um, a lot of those things hold us as humans down, right? They impact us. They prevent us. They actually, from a neuroscience standpoint, they create anxiety inside of us, which causes our muscles to tense, which causes our decision making to go down, which ultimately then locks up our ability to perform, right? And so there actually is, some really cool hard neuroscience that certain thinking patterns or certain beliefs help contribute to lower performance, right? So part of my job is to get players and people to think the opposite, or really just think the correct thinking patterns, and then wire those into the brain so they can unlock all of that potential. They can unlock all of their abilities to perform. A quick example, actually, I'll share two studies. One that I love and is with distance runners, and I share this with a lot of the distance runners that I work with. They took a bunch of athletes and they were going to test them on endurance, right? How long can they run for, and how much energy exertion can they exert? And they broke up two groups, control group, and they said, okay, we're going to have you run, and then we're going to test you a second time and have you run a second time. That was sort of the control group and the baseline, right? Then they took a second group and they had them run, and then in between they taught them how to talk to themselves the right way to enhance performance, right? A lot of I can statements, a lot of confidence building statements, but more specifically how to direct their attention to specific cues, right? And then they had them run the second time. And this group, this experimental group, outperformed the control group by 22%. So they could run further, and they exhibited more energy output by 22%. So that just gives you a small illustration of most people aren't fully maximizing their potential, and just learning one simple skill on how to talk to yourself while you're performing, you can go from here to 22% further, right? And I love that you brought up Steve Prefontaine, because one of the things he was just so known for was his ability to compete. He wasn't always the fastest one out there, but when he got into a race, like, he just battled and could compete. And a lot of that comes down to that mindset. Can I push myself further and endure the pain more than the guy standing next to me, right?
That kind of, just really quick, that really reminds me of when I was growing up. I was the oldest boy of a family of 8 kids. And so, of course, I had to bully some of the younger ones.
Yeah, it's your job.
That's my responsibility. And one of the things I always did was grab their hand and just, smack themselves with their hand. Why are you hitting yourself? Why are you hitting yourself? And that's what we do to ourselves internally. We smack ourselves and talk down to ourselves. And a lot of people don't even know that they're doing it, for one thing.
Oh, yeah.
And for another thing, it's you can completely change the way that you think just by a little bit of extra mindfulness and intention, and learning what those key phrases are that work for you.
Yeah, and actually, I'll add to that. We actually hear in a lot of our work, it isn't just necessarily changing the way you think. We actually call it you're reprogramming your brain. You're wiring in what we call proactive intelligence. You're wiring in the correct way to think. That's one of the fascinating things about the brain, is it doesn't really understand, like, it doesn't really understand do's and don'ts. It only understands objectives, right? So if you say something like, do you play golf? I like to play golf. But
yeah.
If you say something like, don't hit this in the water, what happens? You smoke it right into the water. But again, the brain doesn't really understand that. The other part is the brain doesn't really understand what is a helpful thought and what is a harmful thought. And so when you start to talk to yourself in a harmful way that diminishes performance, your brain just goes, oh, Adam is thinking this thought, therefore that must be important. Therefore, I'm going to store that in the brain and tell the body what to do, right? So it's just very linear and logical, like computer programming, right? And so, so we actually go to work saying not necessarily just changing. Well, it is changing mindset, but it actually is rewiring the brain. You're actually programming the brain, and if you can do that enough, you'll wire in a habit, and so then your brain will actually just think that way normally, not normally, but just more automatically.
More by default.
Yeah, exactly. So we spend a lot of time wiring in the correct thinking patterns to then build the right habits so that you can perform your best. That takes work. That isn't just, it isn't a magic trick, and it doesn't happen overnight. Just like your kids learning how to throw the javelin, like you gotta wire that in. You gotta program that in.
Yep, and that's why I think taking this approach with sports and learning how to reprogram and rewire your brain, that process is really the only way we can guarantee that we're successful in whatever else we want to do, because we are in charge of, by a large measure, I think, we are in charge of the way and the direction our life goes. Things will happen to us, but the way we respond to them is entirely up to us.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're programmed to respond in a positive way, you could have a house fall on you and you would still find a silver lining to it, just because of the way you've programmed and rewired yourself to be thinking about all your experiences.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit, I love what you said there, right? If your brain is wired the right way, you can handle adversity or obstacles or a house falling on you in the right way. I actually fully believe that, like, life is going to be hard. It's going to kick your butt. It's going to pick you up, throw you down. I mean, it's going to be difficult. And there really is no way to avoid that. But I do think there's a call it a contemporary belief out there in the psychology world that people want to avoid pain, or they want to avoid discomfort, or they want to be happy, they want to be content, they want to be satisfied, all of this stuff. And in order to get there, you have to avoid pain or avoid discomfort. And so there's a large contingency in the world trying to get to that state. I actually believe the only way you get to that state actually is to punch right through all the hard stuff and learn how to overcome those things and learn how to navigate those things. Because the challenges and the pain and the difficult things that we go through in life, they don't go away. I think with age and with wisdom and with experience, we get better at navigating those, right? But I do think you can program the mind, you can learn those specific skills to, instead of run away from a hard situation, to turn right towards it and say, yep, I can navigate that.
Yeah, I would think it's such a blessing to have somebody telling me that stuff every single day, whether if I was playing a sport or running a business. It's just that kind of mental boost, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I mean it's why I have a job, right? Like I get to work here at BYU with all the athletes here. I do work with several companies where I train their executive teams, I train their sales teams. I work with individual leaders who, like you described, like, hey, can you just help me organize my mind so that I can go and perform my best? And like you, like yours isn't a sport right now. I call them corporate athletes, right? Like your sport is running your business, right? And the same interference or the same distractions that maybe a professional athlete might experience over here, you're having very similar thoughts and experiences and challenges and maybe reactive intelligence happening that certainly you could benefit from, learning how to think the right way and then navigating those, whatever, the challenges or the adversity that come with running and manage a business, right? I'll just add to that thought, and this is a project that I'm working on personally, right? Imagine being a young kid and learning some of these things earlier, right? How much better off does that sort of set you up to then, move out of the house and go to college, and you and I are probably religious, go on a mission, right? And just go out to the world and like impact the world, right? But like imagine having thinking patterns and the skills to then be able to tackle those earlier on, right? You may go out, get a job, lose your job, and be able to navigate that a lot better than not having those skills and losing that job like absolutely crush you, right? And so one of the projects we're working on with a team of mine, this is outside of BYU, but I started a company and it's called Motivate, MOTYV8. But our whole goal and our mission is to bring mental strength training down to the youth and the high school levels. We know that for high school teams, they can't go and afford somebody like me to come in and speak maybe 2 or 3 times, much less hire somebody on staff at the school, right?
Right.
And so we're trying to build leveraging technology, tools, and resources to then allow a coach like Timo, right, to implement mental strength training to all the players, all the athletes on the team, to then help develop these mental skills, this proactive intelligence way earlier. And what's fascinating about the high school level is most of those kids aren't going to go on and compete in college or professional sports. Like most of those kids participate because they enjoy the sport and they're doing it because their friends are out there.
Yep.
And but you think about learning the skills and developing the proactive intelligence that then helps them take on life, right? So we're on a bit of a mission to try and help get that downstream to younger kids so they can just be able to navigate the challenges and the adversity a little bit better. I'll add to this, and you probably see it. How old's your oldest kid?
He's 18. He's going to be going on his mission this year.
All the way down to youngest?
I just have 2.
Okay, 18 and 14. So I'm 16 down to 7, and we have 5. But one of the things I worry about a lot is the mental health epidemic that's out there, right? I just finished reading a book by Jonathan Haidt. He's a positive psychology professor out of New York University, but he wrote this book called the Anxious Generation. Yep. But he talks about this rise in mental health among our young people, and generally, across the board generally. And he points to a pretty significant culture shift or environmental shift in about 2010, and that's when you got the combination of the phone and social media.
Yep.
And he talks about that combination it rewired our brains. It exposed us to so many different types of things, whether it's the fakeness of social media, right? Like everybody's putting out there, like, this is my best life. I'm a millionaire, and then they live in a cardboard box over here or something. I don't know, but they're putting out these personas that aren't real, right? And then we're consuming that, or our kids are consuming that, and they're starting to compare themselves, like, oh man, I'm not there, and this person is here. And anyways, he kind of outlines, like, here's how that impacts young girls, and here's how that impacts young boys, and it's programming their minds, which is actually causing us to have more mental health challenges. So we see that rising over here, and I'm a big proponent, a big believer that to combat, or the antidote to the mental health challenges that we have in our young people, is you have to build mental strength. You have to learn how to control and think the right ways to have the antidote to some of those mental health challenges. Now, I say that also with respect to, like, I know that there's medications that can help, and I know that there's treatments and therapy and counseling that can help. depending on the severity of the mental health challenge that a kid or a person is navigating, right? No question about that. But I think the majority of the mental health problem is just because we're thinking the wrong ways. Like we have so many of these bad thinking patterns in our brain that's hurting us, right? It's causing anxiety. It's increasing the cortisol in our blood. So we're on a mission to try and change the world, and we're starting small here in Lehi, Utah, right?
Well, this is a program and company that sounds like I could definitely get behind, given that it's very relevant to my own family situation. None of my kids, I mean, I only have two, but neither of them have ever exhibited signs of having to need medication for anything, thank goodness. But I think a lot of our friends and their kids, they're going through that whole medication, anxiety disorder, there's a spectrum of things.
Yep.
And some people use medication to solve that problem. Some people use herbs. Some people use whatever they can get their hands on that insurance will pay for. And there's all these factors that go into how people approach those situations. And I'm biased. I grew up I was homeschooled from 3rd grade to 9th grade. So I was left completely to my own devices for the most part to teach myself math and science and English, and had only my siblings to interact with. And then I went to public school. It was a huge culture shock because all I'd experienced was going to church. That's my interaction experience for 7 years of my life. And I didn't know that the way people acted in church was quite different than how they acted in school.
Yeah.
And it really confused me for a while. And that's just a small snippet of the stuff these kids are bombarded with every day. Just the difference between what you see and what is reality is just becoming wider and wider. And it's harder to spot now because of AI, things like that.
Right.
And it's just making it that much more important to understand the way we think has an impact on our reality, one way or the other.
Yeah, no question.
And actually, the name of my podcast is called Vision with Execution, because the quote by Thomas Edison, or at least it's attributed to him, vision without execution is hallucination, and vision with execution is reality. But it all starts with a vision in your mind, whether it's a mental picture of an actual physical construct or just words or colors or music. Visions can be all shapes and sizes. But if you want it to become a reality, it first starts here. And that works for everything in life. And that's why I'm really impressed by people like Elon Musk, for instance. Whatever his personal faults may be, we all have them. The guy is a master at executing his visions into reality.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
You want to plant an American flag on Mars? Like, the guy's going to figure out how to do it.
That's exactly right. That's the guy who's going to go do it. Whether it's a good idea or not, I don't know. But if we want it to happen, he's the guy, and we all know it. So.
Well, hey, Adam, this has been a fun conversation. I do have to jump off here.